big silence.
Welcome back. Karina here. So happy you're here to join me this week. Um, wow. I feel like this year is flying by. Thanksgiving is coming up in like a week and a half, something like that. Bobby and I, he's not here as my co host once again. I would tell you to DM him and tell him to show up and be my co host, but he's not on social media and he's currently getting a 90-minute massage. That's Barbie. But yeah, we're having Thanksgiving here at the house. The first time we've ever hosted both of our families. So I think there's 17 or 18 people coming. What I'm going to need after this holiday season is a spiritual reset. And I wanted to share first with you here that I am hosting a spiritual reset in January 6th, 2023. It's a once in a lifetime experience at my personal home here in Austin, Texas. I'm about 25 minutes from downtown Austin in this beautiful sanctuary with all these trees and birds and just so beautiful out here up in nature in the hill country. And it's a retreat focused on mental, physical, spiritual health, small group sessions, individual sessions with my personal teachers that I've worked with for many, many years. As you guys know, I'm always about personal development, therapy, and also my friends, my great friends that live here that are leaders in the fitness and spiritual space. So imagine like starting your year off, 2023, here and working out with top fitness trainers, yoga, strength training, motivational conversations with top business consultants to inspire you and take yourself to another level. Spiritual practices from mindfulness to meditation, breath work, sound healing, holographic repatterning with my girl Anne from Sedona, also tarot readings, and also discover your spirit animal. And then there's also discovery art with my girl Rachel Brown. And we'll have B12 shops, all the thing. We got cold plunge, we got sauna. It's one full day, and you better believe it, we're going to have the healthiest food here too. So check it out at myspiritualreset.com or thebigsilence.com. It is the cost of being here goes 100% to the Big Silence Foundation and all of our programs. Our new program that we are launching before the end of the year is to provide therapy and sponsor therapy for those who live in those mental health deserts or don't have access or health insurance. And therapy is expensive. So we are here for you. The other news, of course, notalonechallenge.org. I'm sure you've seen me promoting this. It's with my friend Jewel and many, many other friends. And you can also find the Spiritual Reset in the auction section on notalonechallenge.org, where you can auction. Is that what it's called? Auction. Bid. The word is bid on all these awesome experiences. I have something for dinner at my home, a private dinner, lunch with me at Soho House in Austin, personal training with myself and my private trainer at the Collective, and also train like an NFL pro with NFL pros. So just make sure you're following me on Instagram and you're signed up for our newsletter, because all that stuff we're going to keep sharing. The Not Alone Challenge is to make sure that everyone, as we go into the holiday season, is not alone, because depression and anxiety is at an all-time high. And so I encourage you, not only join the challenge, but also reach out to someone who you may think feels alone and let them know that you love them and they are not alone. All right. And today's podcast guest, the lovely Mary Lawless Lee, founder of Happily Gray. And she has her new book coming out November 15th this year. It's all stories and souvenirs and everyday wonders from life in between. And I love the discussion about so often we think about living life in black or white. But what if we just live in the beautiful gray? We talk about everything from her work as an ICU nurse, transitioning to her new role, being an entrepreneur, divorce, all this stuff, and the little takeaways of living life in gray. So enjoy the podcast. And as always, make sure you comment, share this, so we can keep pumping out these podcasts to help everyone make sure they know they're not alone. Enjoy. All right. Welcome to the podcast, Mary Lawless Lee. So grateful that you're here.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to chat today, and really thankful to be a part of your community.
Yeah, and as I mentioned in the intro, Mary has Happily Gray coming out in November, and you're going on a book tour. We were just conversating about book tour life and pulling it all together. And so, actually, I'll in the show notes, I want to share a link of everywhere you're going because you're going to all the hot spots. So I'm definitely going to see you here in Austin.
Thank you. Yeah, we're excited. I don't really know what I'm doing, but more than anything, just excited to like meet people face to face and to be able to like connect with women,
Y-
in all these different cities.
You know what we're doing. I mean, I always say I don't know what I'm doing, but when it comes down to it, we know what we're doing. You're a mom of two, you're pregnant 5 months, and you
Mhm.
got it. You're
It
just writing a
it def
book.
it just always, it feels that way. You're like running 100 miles an hour kind of at all different things, and so I think it feels like, "Oh," but yeah, no, when it comes down to it, I'm grounded in the, like, "Okay, we can do this. We can do this," and so just
Yeah.
feels crazy in the moment of all the preparation that goes behind it.
Yeah. So I'm in Austin, and you were, well, actually, before I dive into that, what does Happily Gray stand for to you?
Oh, I love this question because I think over the years, so many people thought it was like my connection to like muted colors or my something with my ex-husband or it actually has a really deep meaning behind my discovery of realizing like life is not black and white. I grew up in a very small town in East Texas, and I think I grew up with this mentality that life was presented black and white. You have to be this or that. And I always kind of was trying to fit myself into this certain box. And through my 20s, and moving to Austin and went to school at UT Austin, it was
Mhm.
just like my world just opened up so much and seeing different perspectives on life. I really started realizing and learning that life is very gray and that, at times it's not going to make sense. And that's actually where I felt the most freedom and the
Mhm.
most safety and the most creative. And furthermore, I worked in critical care as a nurse
Yeah.
for 7 years, and that was really very eye-opening too, because being that close to life and death,
Mhm.
it's you're in this gray space, and it was really I learned so much about the human spirit and the human body, and ultimately, I was at this point in my career wanting to have a creative outlet. I love to write, and so I started a blog as a creative outlet, and I called it Happily Gray because at the time I was understanding this gray space to be really my happy place. The uncertainty, the bliss of not knowing, just the fact that it's okay to not be okay, and I don't have to be exactly this or exactly that. And
Yeah.
so it was my years of discovery and like the kind of the beginning of that journey.
Yeah.
So
I felt called to the title of your book, and I get that because I think it's really important for everyone to understand there is not just the perfectionism, and life is supposed to be that, or it's just devastating. There's the lessons that we learn and meet in the happily gray space, and that's a beautiful color.
yeah, it
And
is.
and in your book, you talk about a lot of lessons. And one of the things I wanted to bring up too, because as marriage.
Mm,
Mhm. And, uh, even I'm married too, and my husband knows I very openly talk about it, and, like, we come from 2 different backgrounds. If you're listening and I just, was sharing with Mary about my background and growing up with a lot of trauma with schizophrenic mother and a lot of, um, a lot of blackness in my life, but finding out the grayness, I guess we'll use that. And in a marriage, finding out that not everything is perfect. Um, but I'm so interested too, because I do have a lot of listeners who have gone through divorce and learning like the lessons of divorce and the shame around it, but moving on
mm,
and finding
yeah.
love
Yeah.
again. Can we talk about that?
Sure. Yeah. So I was married for 5 years and I got divorced when I was 26. I was married very,
Oh,
very
yeah.
early. And kind of in with what I was saying about like growing up in this like conservative small town, life is this or that. I was checking the box.
Mhm.
I was going through, okay, college check, marriage check, um, uh, graduating check, job check, all how you do, and then my whole world expanded. And I woke up one day and realizing, I talk about this quote in my book a lot. I love the plan until I met the dream.
Mhm.
And I realized that I'd quit growing. I'd quit evolving. My curiosity had gone quiet. And I was losing that sense of childlike wonder that I kind of always had. And the biggest heartbreak of all was that the realization of knowing I wasn't growing or evolving anymore as a person. And, at the time when I entered that marriage, I was encouraged by like the steadfastness that it provided and the security that it provided. But once I realized, over those years that I'd quit growing, then that was the true heartbreak. And so that was really my first calling into realizing that, maybe this wasn't the right path. And it was really hard because there's a lot of, not just your own marriage, but like there are people around it. There's a
Yeah.
lot of shame wrapped up in that. And I struggled with that. And I still do. I talk about it in my book. Like I know 400,000% that was the right decision, but there's still the shame that comes back here and there, that, of the disappointment of failing at something. But that was the first lesson in my life where I made a decision for my own happiness, for this own journey of personal growth. And it was pivotal. It was really groundbreaking for me. And I think that, at a time that I didn't feel like I had a lot of support around me, I was the first time I trusted myself.
Yeah.
And that was huge. That was like that opened my whole world up in a new way to know, like, I can trust myself. And so it was a lot of freedom in that
Yeah.
and a lot of personal growth.
I get a lot of questions too, like when two partners are together and you were very young married at 21 when you're still just developing. And I think
Mhm.
that there can be where two partners, like one is like going like this and wants to heal and grow and learn and be curious. And it's okay if, someone you're not meeting in that same spot.
The biggest realization here was, well, two things. One, the heartbreak of stopping, losing that discovery, losing that sense of wonder. And then secondly, realizing I can trust myself and it doesn't have to look like this picture. I
Yeah.
can I can create my own journey. So it's really hard. And there's, like I said, there's still days that I think about it, but
Yeah.
ultimately it was like a stepping stone in my life that I'm so thankful for.
Yeah. So you met him while you're at UT,
Yeah.
and studying to become a nurse. And then you go to ICU, which I have a couple of friends, very close friends that work in ICU. And that is
Mhm.
just a growth and learning lesson, like you were saying about life. So then you're in ICU and dealing with death. And as we talked before this, I'm going to an ICU unit right after this conversation
Mhm.
and to visit a friend. And but then what made you want to leave and made you curious to leave and go on to this new adventure?
There wasn't like a finite moment where I was like, I need a change. I need a new path. Um, I think that nursing propelled me to search for something more. Being in critical care, being that close to life and death, it was there were these like super fragile moments that I was experiencing and learning and becoming a new person through. And it inspired me, honestly, and it made me want to, start writing more. Writing's always been a big part of my life. It's always been kind of my form of meditation or yoga. I'm not a
Mhm.
big yoga person or a big meditator, but writing for me, journaling has always been that and served that in my life. And so I decided I wanted to start back writing again because I felt like I was at that point in my life, I was so in tune with my inner self and centered. And I was looking for something more. And so I started writing and I paid my friend $50 to create a blog called Happily Gray. And I started writing about any and all things that inspired me. Most of it predominantly was fashion, but it was a creative outlet. So it just evolved naturally on its own. And this was like 10, 12 years ago before blogging was a thing.
Mhm.
Um, influencing influencer was like not even a term.
Yeah.
So everyone was like, "Wait, what are you doing?" And for the first part of it was just writing. There was no picture to accompany it. But then I quickly learned and I was having fun with it. Like, oh, I'm going to show people how a style looks. This is really fun. And so it was a creative outlet that turned into like my passion ultimately turned into a new form, of business. And it was slow. It was hard for me to leave nursing, and I was really slow to do it because I think the reality of all that I learned as a nurse is just it was the most impressionable years of my life. I learned
Mm,
true gratitude and true grit, and I've taken that through everything that I do now. And so it was really hard to close that chapter,
yep.
but there was like a gut, instinct calling there that I felt like this is it. This is the next season of life.
So you would say go with your gut. My one of my ICU friends, Carrie, I'm calling you out. She always is like wondering, like, I'm pushed and pulled in all of this, loving the, saving lives and being there for others. But yeah, it's a rough job. It's emotional.
Yeah, I mean, you go through everything, you experience everything. It's very taxing emotionally and mentally and physically, and I have such deep respect for people that do it. I mean, I work with
Yeah.
women that have done it for 28 years, and I just was always in awe of they could show up and kind of serve in that space for patients. It's a calling for sure.
Yeah. So back to journaling and back to the OGs of blogging and Kat and I also started Tone It Up in 2009 before Instagram came out, and I had
Oh
a
yeah,
blog
yeah.
ahead of time. And so, yeah, I totally get that. But so journaling and with Tone It Up, we always encourage journaling. But what sometimes it's kind of like meditation. Where do I start? So, what are your prompts and your advice for anyone just getting started with a blank piece of paper? How do I even start?
So I actually wrote there's like 10 prompts in my book.
Yep.
There's a specific section for journaling because journaling can be very intimidating
Mm,
to try to just like open up a blank notebook and start writing. It's such an honest practice. There's no hiding anything. It's just you and your own words, your own thoughts. And so sometimes I come to the table and I've got like a million things to write. And sometimes I come to the table and I'm like, no idea what to write right now. And that's when I lean on those prompts. So some of those are what made you happy today?
mhm.
Who can you forgive today? Um, what's inspiring you right now? Um, who did you connect with today? There's like 10 of them in the book, and they're great because they give you a starting place. It's a place to kick off. Journaling for me is like therapy, and I just always find that starting with one of those questions really kind of gives me a head start into whatever I'm like meant to get into that maybe mentally I'm just not going there, for some reason that day.
Yeah, I think those prompts are good too, because so often we can get stuck in our heads on like the negative or what I didn't do or what is wrong today and this. But it's like I love being
Totally.
like, actually, what was positive today? Who did I
Yeah.
connect with? What did I achieve? Not what I didn't get to. Or I love that. Who can I forgive today? I have a
Mm,
lot of conversations about forgiveness on the podcast because that's one of my things is forgiveness, not only for that person you may need to forgive, but it's for yourself too.
yeah,
Um,
for sure. I was trying to find them in the book so I could list off a few more, but sometimes you just need like a point to kick off because
yeah.
I did find when I first started journaling like consistently, I journal 3 times a week.
Mhm.
And whether it's, I don't put a time limit, like sometimes it's 10 minutes, sometimes it's an hour. But I found that this is really helpful to have kind of as a backup of if I don't come to the table with something, then these questions always get me into something really good. So
Yeah, I'm good at meditation, sometimes at working out, even though I'm founder of Tone It Up, fitness superstar here, but we all have our moments and our seasons. Um,
sure.
but I wanna get back in journaling because that really helped, and I did that in a lot of different therapies that I've done, and I'll start with, like they're like, "Just write a letter to your inner child. Write about the day," and then I'm, like, 4 pages in, and I'm like, "Whew, that felt
Yeah.
amazing." I just released
Right.
so much. You're
I
inspiring
love
me. I'm gonna start journaling again.
I love that you just said that because so the last chapter, chapter 12, the way the book ends is a letter to my inner child.
Oh,
This necklace, actually, I don't know if you can see it, but it's this tiny little mushroom,
Yeah.
and then it's got a big mushroom next to it. This necklace I bought, over a year ago, and it represents my inner child.
I love
And I
that.
just think this book is a lot about talking about reconnecting with your inner child, and, that work is so important. I started on that journey a few years ago, and every Christmas, every, like, mid-December, me and 3 friends always meet up, and we write letters to ourselves from our inner child and reflect back, and it's a really cool practice. I mean, there's all different ways you can kind of go about it, but it's really, really amazing.
So for those listening, because we've clearly done inner child work and we know what it is when you say inner child, we're like, "Oh, yeah." Can you explain briefly what that means?
It can mean a lot of things for different people, but for me, that's reconnecting to that 10-year-old version of myself. It could be your 6-year-old, it could be your, wherever, whatever place you're coming back to, but reconnecting to that curiosity, that wonder, that innocence, that makes you you, and really being able to find that peace and that trust in yourself and that knowing and that centeredness. And so a lot of the work I've done is kind of going back to those moments in time where I can most vividly remember that 10-year-old self and reconnecting with who I was then and there. And a lot of that for me is about at that age is when I started losing that sense of wonder and that curiosity. I started being more aware of the world around me. And so getting back to that curiosity and has been a lot of the work that I've done,
Yeah.
because that's when we really live in freedom and we really are our most beautiful self. And so it's a great reminder. One another exercise is putting a picture of yourself, a little you, whatever your inner child age is. So me, it was like anywhere from like 7 to 10. I have a picture in the corner of my mirror, and
Mm.
so every time I'm looking in the mirror, I like see her in the corner of my eye, and it's really a lot harder to beat yourself up
Mhm.
if you're looking at your little self. So that's a good little practice to kind of get started in that work.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say is you think about how would you treat seven-year-old Mary? For
Yeah,
me, it's five-year-old Karina. How would you treat her? Treat her, your present self, the same way, with the same love, the same innocence, and write to her as that little girl, like how you would speak to a child like that. I love what you talk about in your book about say yes to adventure. One of my vows when I got married to Bobby was I will always adventure with you. In today's world and society, with the hustle and the kids, the dogs, the everything that we have going on, we don't say yes to adventure enough.
that journey for me started when I made the decision to get a divorce. When
Mm,
I realized that, you know, the world was at my fingertips, and always wanting to stay in this mindset of curiosity, because that kind of coincides with that, being open-minded to adventure. And so that was like my first choice and first like conscious step in the direction of like, I'm going to live a life like this. I want to make this a priority, and I want to find a life partner that also does. And it doesn't mean that you have to go on grand trips or that you have to be on an airplane every other week. I think it's your mindset. It's the perspective that how you approach situations, and even just small things like the type of books you pick, the type of food you eat, the type of places that you try, the type of like going out and reaching out to new friends, people that are different from you. That is an adventure of itself, because that's a different perspective. That's different experience. So it shows up. My husband and I've talked about it. It can show up in such small ways, and we being parents, we have a 3-year-old, an 18-month-old. Even just teaching them that philosophy too of kind of keeping your eyes wide open. There's so much more to see than what you're looking for. I talk about that a lot in my book of like it's not about the big trip. It's
mhm,
about the day to day. Like keep your eyes wide open. And it's a practice that we constantly are talking about in our house, because it is hard. I mean, you have to make a conscious effort too, because as things get busy and crazy and life is nonstop, it's easy to just like you get comfortable, you
mhm.
get on your path. We're always reminded to continue to challenge ourselves with just new perspectives, and through that, we'll find new adventures.
Yeah, I like that. Maybe that's a journal prompt too. How did I adventure today? And then
Ooh,
so for
great
some
way.
people, yeah, like some people may be like, I did nothing today. I just went to the office and then I came home and I made dinner and that was it. But really, like, okay, what have you done to adventure today already?
Oh. Let's see. I we've got about 15 people downstairs doing a huge photo shoot for our skincare brand. So I was supposed to be like prepping and kind of meeting with my team, and I ended up holding this 5-week-old beautiful little newborn that's one of our models today, and
Oh.
sitting and talking to his mother, who his first time mother,
Mhm.
and getting her perspective on just like how that experience has gone. So I guess I could have, been head down in my computer, which I was supposed to be, but instead had a beautiful conversation with her, and it was kind of inspiring being pregnant and now with my third, hearing a new mom's perspective. So that was really cool.
So you could say being present is an adventure.
Yes, I have this tattooed on my wrist,
Yeah,
B,
be.
and it means presence. A lot of people always ask me, does that mean, this or that? But I'm so shit at it that I had to tattoo it on my wrist, but it means being in the moment.
You know what my wrist tattoo here is strength
Oh,
'cause,
beautiful.
a reminder. Just I got this when I was 18 years old, just because I was going through a really dark time. It's just like, "You're strong, keep going." So, yeah, I guess I was so bad at it at the time that I needed to look at it too.
I mean, it's hard. It's hard to live in the present. It's hard to not, reflect back and have regrets. It's hard to not continuously plan for the future. So in that moment, yeah, just stopping and prioritizing that conversation with her was really beautiful.
Yeah. So your skincare line, it's pronounced Nema? Nema?
Nima,
Nema.
Nima.
Okay.
Yeah,
Organic. I'll send you my Tone It Up protein products if you send me your skincare line.
absolutely. I
I
will.
love skincare so much. I'm very dedicated to it.
I definitely will. Ours is a postpartum and pregnancy skincare line, but
Well, maybe
we
I'll
also
send
have
it to
products.
Katrina then. I don't
Well,
have
I was gonna say we have products for women too. Our stretch cream is actually, like, incredibly hydrating. We have a lot of women that use it that aren't even pregnant,
Yeah.
that it's like, dealing with, like, behind the arms, your boobs, your thighs,
Mhm.
your hips. Like, we have a lot of women that use it that have never been pregnant before, so
Oh, yeah, and as women, we fluctuate naturally through our seasons,
oh,
and
exactly.
yeah, so I definitely would love to try that. And speaking of postpartum, you had a pretty traumatic birth experience, right?
I did, yeah, with my first. Yeah, we and this kind of ties back into kind of our bigger conversation we're having here, but I had my plan. I had my, what I thought in my head everything was gonna look like, especially as a new mom. I think a lot of new moms tend to do that. And then we quickly learn you don't have any control. When you're bringing someone into this world, it's really up to them, and you really have to trust your body and trust that this baby knows what to do, and because that's what's gonna happen either way. And so nothing went as planned. I had this, one natural birth. I wanted this and that. I had my doula there. We had our agenda. And then my daughter's heart rate was not stable.
Mhm,
We had like abnormal bleeding, and I write about this in my book because it was I had a lot of grief and shame around after the fact of having to have an emergency section
mhm,
and feeling as if I failed her in that moment of not allowing her to enter the world how I had kind of positioned it in my head that it should be. And ultimately, C-section was definitely a lot safer for her and for me. And there was nothing wrong with it, but it was hard for me to kind of cross that hurdle of realizing, and I held a lot of grief and shame around that for a bit,
and how
and kind
did
of had
you get through it?
yeah, so a lot of it for me was just at the time, so much I was holding so much of it physically. I found that, like, so much of being a mom, I hold that energy physically, and I
Mm,
remember my 5th night home with her, so 5th night home from the hospital, and I just started sobbing, and it came out of nowhere. I didn't even know why initially, and then I kind of started my husband was holding her at the time and looking at me like, "What is wrong with you?" Because I don't I'm just not a big outward emotional person, and I was so overcome, and that physical just letting myself have that moment and sob and, really release those feelings was there was so much healing in just that alone. And then having the conversation with my husband, like, and realizing to myself, it was supposed to be this. I feel as if I didn't do my job as a mother. And there's a lot of lesson there for me to learn because it actually was just the opposite. It was what it was supposed to be. And she was safe and beautiful. And it was more about me realizing I shouldn't have set those boundaries in the beginning. Like
Yeah.
putting those boundaries and those expectations around ourselves when in reality, what's meant to happen is going to. And so, yeah, it was that was kind of my one of my first like big steps into motherhood, and one of the first kind of hurdles for me was letting go of that.
Yeah. That's good for a lot. I have a few friends who have had that experience, but haven't shared it because of shame and guilt and then all of the emotions that come with it, and then working through it. What would your number one tip be for someone who is stuck and whatever stuck means to them to get back to that place
Mm,
of childlike wonder? Like, where do you even begin? Well, of course, read your book, but
I
aside.
love that. I love that. Well, one, I've been there. I
Mhm,
have felt that way, tremendously, and for me at that time, it was the excess that was on my plate, and how much pressure that I felt, and just the weight. And so, the first thing is finding ways that you can, and it just might be one person, but being able to offload some of that, I think is like kind of the first step, and then finding the time for yourself. I think you have to make the conscious decision and really, really be intentional about, I'm going to create time for myself. I'm going to
mhm,
create time for self care. And this is like whatever that time looks like, whether it is journaling, whether it's, 1 hour a day. This is what I'm going to do for myself. I need to reconnect. This is, I desperately need this time. And so it's about offloading, having one person in your life you can trust and maybe hold you accountable
mhm,
to that 1 hour of the day. I feel like accountability has been huge for me because I'll make all these plans, and then, sometimes my follow through just isn't there because things get busy, things come up, and I'm also a people pleaser, and so I want to make sure people are happy with me, and so I think accountability is a big piece of that, and all it takes is just one person to trust, and then setting aside that time, being an intentional with your time. And for me, that was I took 5 days off and I went to a program where I talk about it in my book On Site, which is 60 miles outside of Nashville, and
mhm,
without a phone, without
mm,
anyone I knew in my life, and I took some time for some healing. And so I think it's about really setting that intention, and it doesn't have to look like that, but it could just be a daily 1 hour a day. You're either going to journal, you're going to go for a walk, you're going to take time to, do some sort of physical activity, something that fills you back up.
yeah. And for the mamas listening, advice for them on how to take that hour and not have the mom guilt or by taking care of you first.
It's so hard. That to me, that's the hardest part of motherhood is the mom guilt and the
Mhm,
shame that we're constantly battling. So motherhood has taught me many things, but one of the biggest lessons I've learned is you can't do it all, and
mhm,
ask for help.
mhm,
And I know everyone's resources look differently, but there having one friend in your life, having your husband, being open about what you need and asking for help and setting those boundaries so that you can have balance in your life, because I think it's easy to gets so lopsided as a mother, and that I had to learn that quickly. I was going to do it all. I was going to, like, be up at 5 and get up in the middle of the night and do it all. And I thought for a while I was, but you just can't. It's not realistic. And so you have to ask for help. You have to voice your needs, because ultimately if you don't have it to give,
yeah,
then, you can't give what you don't have. And so,
exactly,
yeah, you have to make sure you're refueling as well.
yeah. Well, thank you, Mary, and I'm marking my calendar. I'm coming in Austin on November 30th. Yeah. Is it
Yes,
November? Yes.
November 30th, is our book signing in Austin, and, the book release is November 15th.
Yes.
So we're 1 week away. Holy cow, yeah.
Oh, wow. Well, congrats. That's exciting. And you got this. I know we're always like, I'm not good enough. How am I doing this? How am I planning this? There's so much logistics of a book tour. I know are done 3 of them. They're
Wow,
but,
you get it.
you're gonna do great, and, you're gonna help a lot of women and men, everyone. So, thank you for joining us, and I will see you soon.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This is a pleasure to be a part of today.
The big silence. The big silence. The big silence.